Okay, this is the March 19th meeting of the Flood and Erosion Control Board of Fairfield, and in attendance are myself, Becky Bunnell, Chair. If everyone could go around and just state your name and position for the recording. Thank you.
Don Lamberti, Vice Chair.
I'm Dick Mahusky. I'm the Secretary.
Charles Abercrombie.
Prue O'Brien, Recording Secretary.
Okay. That's all that are in the room. And then we also have on the phone with us a guest, Mr. Joseph Caffarelli. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and kick off the meeting. The first call to order of business is to hear, consider, and act upon the minutes of February 20th regular meeting. Does anyone have any comments, suggestions, or edits they would like to propose?
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, I have a very minor, well, two actually. On the draft minutes, which were so excellently prepared by me that I'm surprised I found anything wrong with them. Up in the heading, it says February 20th, 2024, public meeting notice. Notice should be changed to minutes.
Okay. And
then down in the first full paragraph under item number 2 in the second line, it says the highest projected levels during the 10, 25, and 50 return period design storms. I would suggest inserting the word year after 50 so that it reads the 10, 25, and 50 year return period design storms. And that's all I have to offer.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any other edits or suggestions?
Just one possible, the very last page in 5 says review the chairwoman's V2 of the draft. What's the V2?
Version 2.
Oh, version 2? Okay. Stupidity. Okay.
Do you want that spelled out, or do you think that's
no, as long as everybody knows what it is.
No, I will. Since I'm going to change these anyway, I will spell out version.
Yeah,
version
I wasn't sure. Okay.
I have a suggestion on number 5 as well. At the end of this first sentence, which ends on line 2, I would insert a new sentence, which says the initial draft of the request for proposal, capital RFP, close paren, was reviewed by the town team, and their comments were incorporated into version 2 of the RFP. And then it would, period, and then it would continue on as it's written, and then at the end of the next sentence, which begins next steps, after the word processes, add to move the RFP to bid.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, did you capture those?
Yeah, let me. I want to just go back and read that. Okay, so after the first sentence, which ends with preparation of the plan, period, insert the sentence, the initial draft for the proposal, open parentheses, RFP, close parentheses, was reviewed with the town team, and their comments are incorporated into version 2. Okay. Their comments were incorporated into version 2.
Of the RFP.
Say again?
Of the RFP.
The initial draft for the proposal, open parentheses, RFP, was, close parentheses, was reviewed with the town team, and their comments were incorporated into version 2 of the RFP.
Okay, that's right.
And then after the last word in the last sentence, an RFP processes insert to move the RFP to bid.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, are there
I think-
any other comments on the minutes?
No.
Seeing none?
Nope.
Being none, can I hear a motion to approve the revised minutes with these amendments?
Okay, motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, please state for the record aye.
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 All right, so approved. Thank you very much. I would like to make a proposal to the board, which, since we have Mr. Caffarelli on the line, we move item 5, which is to discuss marsh migration and the experience of College Place residents, up to number 2. I don't believe we're going to be getting anyone else, Mr. Bishop or Mr. Hurley. I don't believe will be joining us. So, if the board is okay with that, can we have a motion to move item 5 up to number 2 so that Mr. Caffarelli is free to leave after this if he so wants. You're of course welcome to stay and hear the whole meeting, but I figured I would give you a chance to leave if you wanted to.
That was very nice of you.
This is Dick. I will make that motion as verbalized by the chair.
Okay, I second.
Okay. Does the board agree? Say aye.
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 Okay, so moved. So we are now going to move item 5 up to number 2 and discuss the marsh migration and the experience of the College Place residents. Joe, do you want to just give a quick review of the issue? And then I know Dick has done some research and some maps that might be helpful.
Yeah, basically, this started I've lived here 27 years, and probably for the last 3 years, we've been getting a significant amount of water coming to the back of our condominium grade, which slopes down from the foundation, to the point where on many days that water is 4 and 5 and 6 inches deep, and the earth itself is always muddy. Now, up until they put in those new gates, or shortly after that, that's when all these problems started. And it's never totally dry. So we're concerned that it's not good for the soil surrounding our foundations. So we had at this time, I had I think Tim and a couple of guys from conservation come out. They said there's nothing they can do. It's just the way it is. This is the way the tidelands work. You just have to live with it, basically. Then they just came out about 3 or 4 days ago, because the water hadn't really receded, and they said the real problem is that the culvert under Reef Road is blocked, and they can't really do anything to it because you got to get a grant, and there's gas lines, and there's all kinds of other things that are involved, which I kind of lost track of after the first 5 minutes. But he's saying that water is not being allowed to go into the marsh behind Roland Road, which is really creating a tremendous fire hazard. But the people who live around that area don't really know that. So we're just trying to figure out, and then we looked at the tide gates, we discussed those, and he said they're on a bobber or a floater, and when the tides come in, the gates open and they let so much water in, and then when they go out, they go down. But the end result is we have 5 buildings. 2 buildings have water behind them constantly, and we don't know if it's a danger to the foundations of our property or not. But it's unsettling to see that water there day after day, month after month. I went to the town, and these buildings, these condominiums, are not built on pilings. It's landfill with a slab. And so, Tim didn't really have many suggestions, if any. And so basically we just want to know how it's going to be possible to reduce that water level so that it doesn't come within 3 or 4 feet of the soil surrounding the back of these buildings. That's really where we are. Now, he also said that they would never be built. They would never be allowed to be built today. But that doesn't help us because it is today. You know, I mean, so I don't know. I guess our question is, and we pose the same question to Bill Gerber, is how do we get the water levels to stay lower and further away from our soil line? And that's pretty much it.
Well,
Okay. So,
the first question that comes to my mind, the floodgates, is the problem because that doesn't let the water out? Is it a floodgate problem, or what is it?
They say no. They say that those gates are perfectly timed to reflect the water levels coming in out of Pine Creek. And they said it's not that it doesn't let the water out. They let the water in the way it's supposed to, and then it flows out the way it's supposed to. Problem is, too much water is getting in to our area. And I'm not an expert. I just tell you what I see. And I think we sent to Carolyn some information with aerial photographs, overlays, areas that are wet and not wet. And you know, we don't know what to do about it, other than it really should be rectified somehow, because we're not experts.
All right. So, Mr. Caffarelli, this is Dick Mahusky. In your description, you said that somebody came out, and I think I may have heard Tim. Tim came out with a couple guys a while ago, and then just more recently, Tim came out himself. Would you just clarify that first visit when someone came out, was that Tim Bishop?
It was Tim Bishop, and he had another fellow with him. We walked around the property. I showed him where the water was.
About how long ago was that? Was that like a year ago or 6 months ago?
About a year ago. It was like probably a year ago, May.
Okay.
And then we walked around the property. He looked at it. He said, "Well, there's really nothing we can do. It's just the way the tide flows in from Pine Creek." And you know, with that, you know, we just let it go. And I figured, well, we thought maybe it would go back to the way it used to be if the tides were to change, but it hasn't changed. In other words, either there's 4, 5, or 6 inches of water behind the buildings, or there's mud behind the buildings. It has never dry. Years ago, we used to be able to mow the marshlands behind it to cut them down so there wouldn't be a fire, but it's all wet back there now. So there appears to be too much water being directed to the back of College Place. That's what it is.
Abercrombie, you said that the meeting with Tim Bishop was about a year ago, but I'm looking at this memo or email from Tory Waterman.
No, that was the first meeting.
Right.
A year ago, and then Tim came out like last week.
I understand. I just want to make sure that it's clear that you've had people visiting more recently than just a year ago.
Right.
Yeah, he came out about a week ago, whenever it was, and we spent a lot of time here. And Tory wrote the memo and put the graph in there. And Tim really seemed to say that he has to check with engineering, but engineering sent us to conservation, and there was some discussion about trying to get a grant to clean up the culvert under Fairfield Beach Road, and he thinks that might solve the problem, but he's not sure when he can get that done or if he can get the money to get it done.
All right. When you're saying he in this case, are you talking about Mr. Hurley, engineering manager?
No, Tim.
Okay.
I know Bill Hurley has been looking at trying to get that culvert to redo that culvert so that we would have larger, basically pipe openings, you know, underneath there. But he did mention to me that it's very hard to do because there are sewer lines and electric lines and all sorts of things right now that are inhibiting the ability to put in larger pipes, basically. So they would have to completely redo that whole area, and right now we do not have a budget for it. It is something that is on his list to do. He has been wanting to do that for a while, so I know that is it's a potential project, but it is an unfunded project at this point.
So, that's basically what Tim said.
Yeah.
He really wanted to push the first selectman or whoever he gets the money, he wants to try and put some pressure on to get that done because we have a problem, but the people who live on that marshland on Roland Road have a much bigger problem. Because if that thing ever catches on fire, there's going to be a lot of homes that go up. Because I saw this marsh catch on fire several years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and it spreads across it in about 20 seconds. So I think
that's filled with Phragmites right now, that marsh.
Yeah, you're putting these people at risk. Somebody is.
So I know that Tim he applied for one grant and we didn't get it. He applied for a National Fish and Wildlife grant and we unfortunately were not able to receive that grant. He is actively applying, I know, for another grant right now. I don't know what the timing is of that. We can check into that. The question I have is, do we know that that's going to solve the problem?
He seems to, I'm not an expert, and he spent a lot of time with us, and he felt that by redirecting the water that's coming in should be going through that culvert to that other marsh, and it's not getting there, so it's backed up behind in this marsh. It's over here, and he thinks if that were to be cleaned out, that we wouldn't have this problem. That was his opinion.
Okay, Mr. Caffarelli, did you have any substantive conversations with Bill Hurley, or was it just in passing and he said, conservation runs the tide gates, talk to them?
Yeah, we try to have as much substance with conversation as possible, but that's pretty much how it ended up.
Okay. All right, well, I have looked around and I have started to educate myself on the topic. I don't have the answers. In that set of self-regulating tide gates, that was completed in 2016. So that's been 7 years ago now. When you said that you've had this condition happening for the last 3 years, could it be 7 years? Does it really go back to when that job was finished? Do you know that, or?
No, I don't know that. How would I know that? I mean, I just think that the water levels, for whatever reason, that marsh used to be dry. Behind our house and 10 feet into the marsh used to be dry because we'd have to cut it back every year in case there was a fire.
Right.
And
okay.
Maybe it was 3-5 years. I don't know. I don't really. Time kind of dissipates, and I don't know.
Yeah.
It was a while ago that it was dry, and it has not been dry significantly. It's been significantly wetter the last 3 or 4 years, to where you can't really bring the lawnmowers back in to cut back the grass.
Okay.
And that I know.
So when that installation was completed, there was an initial marsh water level that was identified, and that level is elevation 1.83 feet. Okay.
Yep.
Your group of condominiums there, that group of 5, they sit on a little kind of plateau, and I'm getting this information from the GIS maps that the town has available, and they have a topographical layer on there. So this just comes from that. These could be off by a little bit, but for talking purposes, they're satisfactory, I believe. So the houses themselves, they sit on land that's at elevation 6. Okay, so that's 4 feet above this 1.83. Let's call that 2 feet. Okay. So the next topographic line down is an elevation 2, which is kind of like the water level. That is the target water level for the marsh, and that comes pretty close to the 139 house.
The 189.
189. Yeah. Okay. 189. So that topographic line comes pretty close to that house, and then it's farther away from the others. So I don't know what the historical, back before those self-regulating tide gates were put in, I don't know what that historical marsh water level may have been. At that time, the tide gate was simply a flapper gate that stayed closed against the water level in Long Island Sound. And it would open if there was rain or something that filled the marsh up, and then when low tide happened out in the Sound, it would drain out through that simple flap gate. And that's not the case now. What I need to do to continue my education is to talk with Bill Hurley and Tim Bishop and see what has transpired with respect to the, let me get the name right, with respect to the advisory committee. This is in the original documentation for installing those tide gates. It says the Pine Creek Tide Gate Advisory Committee will be responsible for developing the management approach and operational guidelines within which the tide gates will be operated. They will prescribe modifications to tide gate operation as needed. Under the direction of the advisory committee, the Conservation Department and or the Public Works Department will assess how tide gate operation affects the Pine Creek salt marsh. Will also provide or arrange for the provision of water level monitoring in a method and location to be reviewed and approved by the advisory committee.
Okay.
Should immediate, well, that's immediate. So there is this advisory committee, and initially back in 2015, this document I'm looking at is from June 26, 2015.
Okay, yeah.
The advisory committee shall consist of the following members: First Selectman, Department of Public Works Director, Engineering Department Manager, Conservation Department Director, and then there's one DEEP representative and one U.S. Army Corps of Engineers representative, but they're like a resource to this committee. So that's my next step, is to reach out to these four entities in town and find out what, if anything, has been transpiring with the advisory committee. And then to see if they have any information on what the previous levels were that apparently, from your group's perspective, your lands were pretty much dry. Maybe if we got a heavy rain or something, you get some temporary increase in the water level. Am I stating that appropriately?
Very good. Yeah, and the big issue, and it may never be an issue, is that when we see this muddy dirt or mud behind our properties, we don't know how far down it's going and if it's working its way under these buildings. You know, that's really the big concern. You know, we don't know if they're going to topple over or if it's being undermined because of all the constant wetness there, or it's not. I don't know how we tell that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's basically what I know. As far as the culvert under Reef Road, taking water over to the eastern section of that marsh. Okay. Well, the idea of the self-regulating tide gates is that at some Long Island Sound level, it's supposed to close those gates so that no additional water gets into the marsh. So if those are properly working at their initial setting of 1.83, whatever I said, if those are properly working and you guys still have water a lot closer to your dwellings than it used to be 5, 8, 7 years ago, then maybe it's time for the advisory committee to say, hey, can we lower that level by a half a foot and see what happens?
Yeah, I think that'd be great if you could do that.
Just for reference, our low tide here in Fairfield is at like minus 3.2 feet maybe. So it's minus 3 feet, and they're saying the initial target for the marsh water level was plus 2 feet. So that's a 5-foot difference between low tide in the marsh and high tide in the marsh. And the objective there is to make a healthy marsh. You have to have the exchange of salt water to keep the marsh healthy, to prevent the Phragmites from growing, and to encourage the good marsh grasses to grow.
No, yeah, I can see a difference. I mean, there is a difference as far as there's less Phragmites, more green grasses in the summertime. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice. I mean, you know, we can't really do anything on our own because, first of all, we'd have to get all kinds of state and federal permits, and putting in a kind of a seawall would be extremely expensive, and you know, probably we couldn't afford that. If we could get the
probably you couldn't do it because DEEP would say, "Oh, a tidal marsh. Oh well, marshes migrate." I mean, that's one of I want to say this appropriately. One of the my perceived postures of DEEP is that, yeah, well, sea level is rising and marshes are migrating, and you people need to get out of the way of the natural processes. So
I heard that. I mean, Tim was kind of like saying the same thing, and frankly, we just can't pick these houses up and go anywhere.
Yeah, well, I know that's going to be a continuing problem as we go forward in time here. So
yeah, I think so.
I don't have any further insight into the situation than what I shared with you. As I said, I'm going to go and chat up these various people and see if I can ferret out what's what, and if the advisory committee has become defunct, maybe I'll help encourage them to restart it, because there is a real circumstance that I think is appropriate for them to address. So that's my personal action plan.
Yeah, I think it's very impressive, and I'm very impressed with you guys that you looked into it, and it makes us feel a lot better because at least we have some allies now that we can talk with.
All right, so we'll keep you updated as to what Dick is able to find out. So let's give us, you know, a few weeks to try to re-engage this advisory committee and see if we can get them engaged, and then we will circle back with you and let you know what we find. How's that?
That's more than kind. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other discussions on this at this point? I think there's more questions than answers at this point, but let's at least see if we can't get some more informed answers from this advisory committee about what our options are.
Well, we thank you very much, and we'll chat with you later then. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, bye now. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
So I'm now going to propose, Dick, you're going to be on point for writing that letter?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk to Tim. I talked to Tim very briefly, but you know, just to confirm that he was out there, and he's fixated on the culvert backing up the water. But I have a whole different opinion. I think the tide gates are supposed to stop the water at a given level, and then if the culvert is slow on letting that drain over to the east marsh, that should simply reduce the level that's already stopped in the western section of the marsh. But that's all to be determined.
Yeah, I don't know enough about that. It seems to me that we could reset the level of the tide gates to allow the water to be 1.5 instead of 1.83, and that might solve the issue. But then the question is, are the marshes less healthy? Because I think the key is that we have to have active, healthy marshes as well. So there might be other solutions for the foundations that, if indeed we can't reset the tide gates.
Well, the bottom of the pipe that is at the culverts, the bottom of that pipe is at let's call it's sloped, so it goes from minus 0.93 feet to minus 0.67 feet. So it's like minus 3/4 of a feet, minus 3/4 of a foot. So so that would leave 0.67 feet in the marsh as the Long Island Sound continues to drop off. So there'd always be some residual above the low tide inside the marsh, just based on the elevation of the pipe.
Right. Which should keep the marshes healthy, presumably.
Yeah. And so the 1.83, which is the initial proposed setting, so that's like 2.5, that's like 2.5 feet. So there would be 2.5 feet of water exchange in the marsh on each tide cycle. But then if 1.83 is bad, it could go down to, let's say 1.0 just for argument's sake, and then that would be like 1.5 feet of exchange. So at some point, lowering that water is going to get to insufficient tidal exchange to keep the marshes healthy. So that's where the trade-off has to come.
Exactly. But it could be a matter of just a few inches.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's set now to stop the water at 2.5 feet.
Right.
So they can come down 6 inches.
That's correct, I think.
It all needs to be determined.
Okay. So let's move on.
So yes, I will take point on that.
So let's, unless there's any other conversation on this, let's move on to item 2, which was update on status of active projects. I had a brief conversation with Bill on 2 of the projects, which are actually items 3 and 6. So I will hold off on those. Dick, were you able to touch base with him on any of the other active projects?
I did touch base with him after he came back from his 2 vacation days, and as per usual, Bill was up to his armpits in alligators. Yeah, I talked to him to see what the story is on the railroad bridge tide gates over on Old Dam Road, because that should be going out to bid. He said he was going to follow up with Race because he agreed the bid package should be ready to go out. And then I also talked to him about the Turney Creek Riverside Drive tide gate project. I also confirmed, because I have since looked it up, but I had in my mind, and he confirmed it, that Terry Contracting, who is getting the contract for Turney Creek and Perry's Green, they are the firm that constructed the tide gates that we were just talking about with Mr. Caffarelli. So they've been around the block on this stuff before. Also, as far as Rooster River goes, Tunxus Hill and Fairchild Wheeler, we have received the Army Corps of Engineer permits for those 2 sections of the Rooster River plan, so that should get those moving along, I think.
Is there enough time to use the money before, or is the money going to run out?
Yeah, well, that's what, because that was, the Rooster River was left in the ARPA funds for another month, I think, in conversation. Yeah. They're leaving it there for another month to see if we can get going on that and get those funds expended from ARPA before they expire. So that's part of the pressure on getting this done. The other part is to stop the flooding or mitigate the flooding as we can. I also discovered that there's a little mini project that has been, I think the contract has actually been issued, and this is to repair the headwalls on 4 culverts upland in the watersheds of, and I'm not exactly sure, I haven't looked at the map, Mill River and I think it's just a Mill River watershed. So there's 4 culverts there that had their head walls damaged, and they're going to be repaired.
Okay. I do know that the DPW crew was out along the bulkhead of Pine Creek, looking at all the flap gates and duckbill gates, all the different kinds of tide gates that are along that bulkhead section, and they were, I think they were at least just cleaning them and it was on Instagram. That's how I saw that. So they were at least fixing any ones that were stuck in open positions. I don't think we're replacing any at this point. I think we are just checking to see operability and state of where they stand.
Okay.
Can we go back to the Rooster River thing for a minute? Now that there's been
Sure.
Permits issued, shouldn't the funding and the ARPA money be back on the Board of Selectmen agenda to push it forward?
I think there's a comment here Chuck, I think we're still in the comment period for the Army Corps. If I remember correctly, that goes into early April. Isn't there a comment period?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
So until that has closed, then it would go back on the Board of Selectmen to confirm that it stays within the ARPA and those, as long as we don't get any negative comments, at the end of the comment period, we can probably confirm and release the money.
But then the bid packages have to go out. We have to get the bids before the contract can be issued. The money is not encumbered until the contract is issued, as I understand it. So that all means that the contracts have to be issued before December 31st in 24, and the work has to be completed and the money actually given them before December 31st, 2025. So the timeline is still important there.
Do you remember was it Ty and Bond that was doing this? I can't remember which firm was doing the rooster.
Yes.
So at least it's not on race, because one of my concerns is that we as a town give a lot to race, and as a result, I don't think it appears to me that they're not as timely as they could be because they've got so much on their plate. So I'm glad to hear that this is a different firm, because putting together those bid packages and getting all that ready, I wouldn't want to have been putting that back onto the same firm that's trying to do all these other projects.
And again, race is focused on coastal. This is all inland, riverine stuff. So they might not have as good a skill set as a Ty and Bond would, or a GZA or somebody. Mm-hmm. Okay. The other thing that I have dusted off my old spreadsheet for the project list, and I need to repopulate that based on what Bill's been feeding us for the last couple of months, and sit with him and get status and so forth. And if you all recall, way back when, we had two sections. We had hard flood and erosion projects, which contains 36 line items. And then we had another sheet with soft topics, which had 14 topics on it. So there's a total of 50 topics that we identified at one point in time. I'm unclear in my own mind whether they are all still germane or not, but for the next meeting, I will recast that so we have something to review and help our focus.
Okay, and you're going to align that with the existing capital plan as well, just to update budgets as well, right?
Yes, that spreadsheet does have columns for where the funds appear in the capital plan. And the current capital plan, it's pretty good in identifying that, more so than previous capital plans have been. So I should be able to map over good information for that.
And we had a second spreadsheet that was a slightly simpler spreadsheet that was more of a flood and erosion control board, our version of the capital plan, that took those same projects and laid them out into, and I think we only went out 5 years versus 10 because the years 5 to 10 are so nebulous. But I think we had looked at a 5-year capital spreadsheet just to lay out those same projects in a one-pager. Can we incorporate that spreadsheet into your spreadsheet? Because your spreadsheet was a very historical spreadsheet. It had all of the background, right?
Yeah. It goes back a number of years.
So I'm wondering if we integrate these two spreadsheets into one document, and this becomes our tracking document, rather than trying to have two separate tracking documents. Does that make sense?
I think that's the only way to go, to have one common tracking document and just put everything in there, and then you pay attention to whatever you want to pay attention to, but it's all there.
Okay, so can you look at integrating that capital plan sort of one pager and maybe into the beginning of your spreadsheet, so it's a shortened version than your longer spreadsheet that has all of the historical context becomes sort of the background for anything, if anyone wants to understand the sequence of when we got grants, when we applied, when we didn't, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I will attempt to do that.
Okay. Let's, any other update on active projects that anyone has?
I have one question. The Army Corps gave approval to give those two projects. How much relief is that going to give the people? A major part of the relief or a minor part? Do you have any sense of how much that will help?
I'd have to go back to Ty and Bond's analysis report.
Yeah.
Because they ascribed a percentage of detention for each of those locations. So I think the numbers are there, so you can say, okay, the total volume is 1 million cubic feet, and this detention area is going to take care of 200,000. This is going to take care of 100,000. So that's 30% of a million.
But this will give it. You think it might give an appreciable benefit to the people, or no sense?
I don't know.
It will be a benefit, but it will not stop the flooding completely. Is my understanding.
I agree with that.
Okay.
That's the bottom line.
Okay.
It's like it's gonna reduce the flooding by a foot, but when you've already got 11 feet going down to 10 feet, you're still gonna flood out the majority of what you flooded out at 11 feet.
Right.
But I also think the work that they're doing to remove a lot of the debris and things like that, which would have clogged up the culverts, which would have mitigated, which would have meant more flooding. A lot of that work is also going to help as well. And it's hard to put a number on that level of help. But I think there's another $2.5 million that we're sharing, a grant that we got that we're sharing with Bridgeport that, again, is looking more towards cleaning up the river and culverts and stuff, is my understanding, is most of that money will go towards that. All right, I'm going to move us on to item number 3, which is update on the Penfield Resiliency Project. So as you recall from our last meeting, we had agreed to submit at least the Flood and Erosion Control Board recommended options to be looked at. We submitted those. I did try to follow up with Eli to confirm that they were submitted and ask if RACE had been able to give us a rough approximation of when they thought they might get back with design options. I have not heard back from Eli, unfortunately, but I was able to touch base with Bill, who did confirm that they've been submitted to RACE. And so I will continue to follow up with Eli to see if I can't get a sense of timing of when we should expect to see design options.
Okay, well that's good, because when I talked to Bill on, I don't know, maybe it was Tuesday, whenever, he was unsure, and he was going to call RACE because he had some other things to talk with them about, and he was going to see what the status was of them proceeding with the Penfield Resilient Plan.
Okay, that's great. I mean, so I'll follow up with both Bill and Eli then, in case Bill was able to get a date from them. I did mention that I was looking for a date of, just at least an approximation. Are we talking about, end of April, or are we talking about June? I don't think this should be a huge project. I think all of you saw the Massachusetts dune that washed away in 3 days after they spent $500,000. That just makes me, again, more concerned about a non-reinforced dune option as our main lead for this project. But I know that will be the easiest one to get permitted, but I do have some concerns about its ability to truly protect the neighborhood.
Well,
any other questions?
RACE should be able to offer some kind of opinion about whether being on the Sound or being on the Atlantic Ocean is going to make a material difference.
Yep.
They should. I mean, their modeling should be able to give us the sense of the wave impact. I mean, that's what the modeling does do. It gives us the load factors that they use to look at the foundation loads. So it does give us a sense of the intensity of the storm and the potential loads that could be placed on a dune. Presumably the same load factors would be placed on a dune that would have been placed on the foundation.
So Salisbury, Massachusetts has about 2,000 miles of fetch. So yeah, it should be a little different than Long Island Sound, where we've got maybe 50 if the wind's blowing down the Sound.
Well, I will say that storm that we had a year ago, I want to say it was December, maybe it was, that washed away about 2 feet of Fairfield Beach elevation. Now, most of that has come back again, but we got a pretty intense erosion factor in that big storm, and that was one storm. So we do get storms that have that kind of an impact. Anyway, anything else on Penfield resiliency? So I think there's still a timing question, but at least we know that they have our input, and that we do know that they're working on it. Item number 4, update on the board's request to the Board of Selectmen for a resolution. I'm going to follow up and see if that can't get onto the upcoming Board of Selectmen agenda, which I believe is next week, and I believe the agenda gets finalized on Friday. So I'm going to follow up with Jen Carpenter and just see whether this can be one of the items for that agenda. And if not, when would be the next agenda? The Board of Selectmen meeting, I think, might be April 11th, and then there's April 18th, I think, are the next 2, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully we'll get it on the April 11th agenda.
When are you back in town, Becky?
March evening of March 29th. So I will be back for April 1st in person. So I will if I can get on the April. Well, actually, yeah. So I won't be able to be there in person, but I could be on the phone for if it ends up being next week's agenda.
Oh, that's okay. We'll just send Dawn.
I'm not going to be here April. I won't be here for the April meeting.
No, if it's next week.
Oh, next
I don't
week.
know when.
Board of Selectmen?
Yeah, when's the next?
Wednesday.
This coming Wednesday. The 20th.
Yeah, the 28th.
The 20th. No.
So I don't know if Jen will let us get on the agenda for then. If we can, who would be able to attend in person?
28th. It would be the 28th.
Would somebody be able to attend in person of the board?
You're the one that knows.
I'm not raising my hand no more. I'm turning off. You people have to step up here. Certainly, this is Dick. Certainly, I would be happy to attend. If I'm at all able to do so, I will make every effort to attend and tell them that we would really like their support.
Okay, and I will try to attend via phone because I will be in a car at that point. So it could be tough.
27th.
27th, okay. And if it's April 11th, I'll be back by then, so I can attend in person.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We already went through the marsh migration. Item number 6 then is discuss the new 2024 Master Flood Mitigation and Resilience Plan. So here's where we stand with that. We had gotten a proposal from David Murphy to support the Flood and Erosion Control Board and the town in finalizing and firming up the RFP and basically also helping evaluate and review the potential bidders for the project. I talked to Bill Hurley and said that we need to come up with $25,000 of professional services funds. He doesn't have any professional services in his budget. However, he and I both agreed that we felt it would be appropriate to take $25,000 from the Jennings to Penfield $100,000 that beach club money that we had allocated currently in his budget, as that is part of a master plan, and use that to support David Murphy's professional services. So he and I were aligned on that. I shot a quick note to Bill Gerber asking if he was okay with this. He said yes, he agreed with the approach. So I went back to Adam in purchasing and Bill, and they are working now on a professional services contract for him for the $25,000, which would include items 1A, 1B, and 2A of his proposal. So that is moving ahead.
Excellent.
So what that means is I think I will try to tighten up a version 3 of the RFP while purchasing is doing its magic and working up the professional services contract. just so we can incorporate some of the things that we might have learned in the interim since we first did version 2. And we'll use that to work with David Murphy. And then what we'll do is set up some meetings with Flood and Erosion Control Board and David to review the RFP and get him involved and start to help us tighten up the RFP so that it can be ready for a bid package. So that's good news. What we would have to do after that, though, is then find the money to actually do the whole project, which is going to be much more than $25,000. Bill has said that he supports doing this. It is a priority for him, and he says he will find us the money. So I will let's take it step one at a time. Let's get the RFP tightened so that we have a town alignment on an RFP, and then we'll work on trying to secure the funds to go out to bid. Any questions or any other updates that anyone's aware of?
Well, just kind of associated with that master plan topic, just for the rest of the board's information, Becky and I and Bill Hurley and Emmeline, we had a phone conversation with the conservation director of Greenwich, and whose name escapes me. Was she Elizabeth something? Liz something?
Yeah, Beth. Elizabeth, but Beth. She goes by Beth.
Beth, that's right, Beth. And it was very interesting, and what I learned was that all the towns have the same problems. So, and no money to do anything about it. But I thought I enjoyed the conversation. Just comparing notes was interesting.
Yeah. All right. The last agenda item is any other business that should come before the board. Does anyone else have any other business they'd like to put on the table for discussion?
Okay. You sent out our second newsletter from Flood and Erosion. How many recipients do you have on that list now?
I have 109 right now, but I haven't loaded all of your river. You'd given me a Riverine list, and I was searching my email for it to try to include them in this, and I could not find it. So I'm going to keep looking for that. But you sent me some names a while back. I'm not sure where.
I think I can find that and resend it to you.
If you can, I can add those. And then I also sent that to the Mill River president and asked him if he would be willing to either forward our newsletter and encourage anyone on his mailing list to sign up to the Flood and Erosion mailing list. So hopefully we will get new people on our mailing list coming from that as well. He would be very happy to send that out.
Okay, that's good. Yep, that's a resource. Then the other thing in this, on April 4th at 6 p.m. at the Fire Training Center, there's going to be a presentation by DEEP about what homeowners on the shorefront can and cannot do and where they have to say, "Mother, may I," and so forth. So that has gone out on the Fairfield Beach Residents Association newsletter. And
when is that meeting?
April 4th, 6 p.m.
At the fire training.
Yes. And this is Dick. I have nothing else that I think is pressing.
I don't have anything either. Anyone else have anything else they'd like to put on the table?
No, that's it. Can
All
I
right,
make a motion to adjourn?
Yes. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right. The meeting is adjourned at, I've got, well, for me, it's 5:55, but for you,
Okay.
it's 7:55.
7:56.